Okay, so now we finally get to talk about some of the craziness that's been happening in Toronto and some of the decisions that Treliving will have to make in the next, 5 weeks. He'll have to have some sort of decision. Less than that, actually. Yeah. We're looking at 3 weeks until July 1st, roughly. So, of course, July 1st is the date that Austin Matthews' no-move clause kicks in. I think Nylander has a 10-team modified no trade. Mm-hmm. So those are a couple things there, as well as Mitch Marner, his no trade kicks in on the 1st, as well as free agency. We have the draft coming up soon. So these next 3 to 4 weeks are going to be crazy for Brad Treliving. So I guess before we get into the specifics, what do you think is priority number 1 for Brad Treliving?
34. That's priority number 1. He's the face of your team. He's your Hart Trophy winner. So nothing gets done until you lock him up.
Yeah, fair enough. I feel the same way. I've heard people say Sheldon Keefe maybe should be priority number 1.
No, the star takes precedence over the coach.
Yeah, okay.
The star always outlives the coach.
Well, when it's a time of such uncertainty with one of the best players in the world, I agree. I think that's who you focus on. It's a bit of a tough situation for Sheldon Keefe because he's just sitting there idly and not really sure what his future holds. Also, that means he can't interview for other teams who have head coaching vacancies. So if he ultimately does get canned, that's going to be tough for him because he'll be out of a job, presumably, for at least this season. But sticking on Sheldon Keefe, because this will be a quick one, what do you think happens with him?
Yeah, I feel like you're at a bit of a weird time where, you're not going to see too many more coaching changes. A lot of guys have a lot of teams have already made that move. Of course, you saw Nashville do it kind of late, so nothing's impossible, but I don't suspect you're going to see the Leafs announce, I guess wait for maybe after the podcast they will. But I don't suspect you're going to see the Leafs announce before the draft that they're making a coaching change, in which case then you're getting into July, you're getting into August where teams are going to have their coaches in place to the extent they don't already have them, and teams are going to be more inclined to just wait till the season starts to make that move. So my gut feeling is you probably see Sheldon start the season with the Leafs, see how it plays out. He of course is also lame duck this year, so he's going to be fighting for a contract himself. If the team stumbles out of the gate, then I think there's not really any hesitation on Treliving's part to make that move,
right?
Especially given the lack of history. But yeah, I think he's kind of in a weird spot, and it's not like he's coming in as the GM and taking over a team that has played poorly. Like, he's coming in and taking over a team that has been really, really good in the regular season and seems to like the coach. And so there's all these reasons for him to keep him around. The only one that would be going, or I guess 2 that would be going against it, is the way the playoffs played out, and B, simply just because he's not his guy. So I think he'll take a look around, and undoubtedly Treliving and Shanahan as well have been thinking, is there somebody better that's out there? If there is, then make the move soon. If not, then I think you're going to see Keefe behind the bench. But one other thing I'll add too is I see a lot of talk out there of either you fire Keefe now and let him go and interview somewhere else, or you just have him wait till the start of the season. And as I've expressed, I think he will start the season as the coach of this team. But kind of going back to our earlier discussion about Dubas and Shanahan and the way that played out, sometimes sports is ruthless, and sometimes it may be unfair that a guy's fired at a particular time and now he doesn't get to interview for other jobs. Like, that would suck, and that's not the way that I would want to treat my employees, but sometimes it happens. And if you get to August 15th and for whatever reason you decide I need a different coach in place, sometimes you just got to suck on it, right? So it's possible that it's something that happens prior to that as well. But as I've said a few times now, my gut feeling says he comes back. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I feel the same way. I think, like, originally when we found out Kyle wasn't coming back and Treliving was taking over. I thought it was a foregone conclusion that Sheldon Keefe was out the door and someone else was coming in. And then the coaching carousel kind of turned its gears a bit. Guys were getting hired left, right, and center, and Sheldon Keefe was kind of just sitting there waiting to hear the news. But he never got that news. It seems like Treliving is, going to look around, but it also seems like he doesn't really have a problem with Sheldon Keefe as of right now. So then my question is, if Sheldon Keefe starts the year as Maple Leafs head coach, then what do they change this offseason? Because we know from, I believe it was Chris Johnston who broke it, I say broke it, it's a bit of a rumor that came out that Shanahan went to his guys, his core four guys, and said, our intention is to keep you on this team into next year and not blow it up, basically. So, yes, the general manager changed, but that was something kind of unexpected. I think Shanahan and MLSE anticipated Kyle coming back, and then obviously there was a falling out. But if they bring the coach back and the top four forwards and Morgan Riley, your top defense, and then fill out around it, is that acceptable? Like, how do you justify doing that if the only change is the general manager? And the elephant in the room here, something that we haven't even mentioned, is people are talking about how much autonomy Kyle Dubas even had as the general manager in Toronto. And I don't know if there's any truth to that, and I don't want to speculate, but some have been saying that Brendan Shanahan kind of calls a lot of the shots anyways. So then what's the difference if the only change going into next year is a new GM?
Well, I think you've said it perfectly. Like, if you keep the same coach around and you keep the same core around and, that's what you ride with, then, nothing's really changed. And you see that even just in the way the playoffs played out. Look how many trades Dubas made at the deadline. I don't even know the number, but they brought in so many different players. O'Reilly, Shen, Achari, Lafferty, McCabe. I can go down the list. Yeah. But, you kind of look at how things played out, and nothing seems to have really changed that much because your team is driven by your core players. And so if you bring the core back, then nothing's changed. And if you bring the coach back, then nothing's really changed. I think if ultimately Treliving makes a move on the coach, it's, partly, I think part of that could tie into the fact that maybe the core does come back and you feel like you have to do something. But, you're also correct to point out the autonomy thing. And I don't know the extent of what was being asked or how Kyle felt, but the truth is that the way the team is structured right now, they have ownership who has a president who has a general manager. So whether or not Kyle liked it and whether or not Treliving likes it, they answer to the president. And the president has not changed. So, I would suspect that a lot of the decisions will be similar, but it's, they work in tandem. Like, regardless of what people think, it's not like, Shanahan would call Dubas in the morning and say, you have to call this guy, and this guy, and you have to trade for, playing him as a puppet. Like, Dubas was the GM of this team. He was ultimately responsible for making those moves. And as is the case with every workplace, you have to go to your boss sometimes and say, here's what I'm thinking. And so Treliving will ultimately have to do that as well. But you correctly point out that there's, maybe nothing in effect really changes.
I just think that's tough to justify to the fan base, don't you think?
I agree. One of the best points I heard on this, though, is it's tough to justify the fan base, but it's really easy to justify to ownership, because you can go to ownership as Brendan Shanahan. You can go to the board of MLSE and say, here's a team that, notwithstanding the lack of a Stanley Cup run, has had a great, year after year, great regular season. We have marketable stars. The kids like Matthews and Marner, and Nylander, and all of these guys. We sell out every single game. We know we're going to get at least one round of playoff revenue. Versus, or taking that approach, which is really easy to sign off on as an owner because you're going to make a lot of money. Versus, we're going to trade core piece X, and we risk. It could have easily happened in Florida. They traded core piece. They had a poor regular season for most of it.
Yeah.
And they were in danger of missing the playoffs. Really strong danger of missing the playoffs. And they were a President's Trophy winning team last year.
Yeah.
So, the point is Shanahan could go to the board and say, we're going to trade this player, and we don't know how it's going to work out. We think it'll work out well. We think if it works out well, there's a chance things could be different. But there's also a chance we're much worse. And so you're looking at something that's really uncertain and could result in, the team taking a step back versus something that, while every season of sports is still somewhat uncertain and there's no guarantee you make the playoffs, at least you have a history there to point to and be like, they're going to get it done in the regular season and we're going to make a lot of money. So, point being is, in terms of bringing everything back, I agree. I think it's hard to justify to the fan base when this has happened year over year.
Yeah.
And it would be frustrating, undoubtedly. But to the guys that are running the team, it actually might be a pretty easy sell.
Yeah, I hear you. I haven't heard it put that way before, but that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
Hey, Mr. Tannenbaum and Bell and Rogers, this is what we're going to do. We're going to bring in the same amount of revenue as last year. We're going to play 1 to 2 playoff rounds with this team who's guaranteed to get at least that far.
Yeah.
And you're going to make a ton of money just like last year and the year before and the year before, as opposed to, hey, we're going to kind of change a lot of things up here, and we don't know how it's going to go.
So, and all those, if it was, obviously people like to throw around Marner, but it's like, if you trade Marner, it's like, all those 16 jerseys that you saw, those are gone.
Yeah.
That 100 points that he's going to put up, that's gone.
Yeah.
And, then all of a sudden it's like we go from put up a 112-point season as a team to maybe we're 94 points. Maybe we're kind of squeaking in down there with the wild card teams. And maybe you don't make the 4 to 8 games worth of playoff revenue that you've been making in years past. So, there would be a lot of uncertainty. If I was an owner, that would keep me up at night. But again, we're going to, you seem to want to focus on the fans here. So we'll focus on the fans. And I agree. It'd be quite frustrating and quite, it'd be frustrating to see the same story all over again. And just kind of have to sit here and wait for April to run around and roll around to see if the same story plays out. So
it almost makes the regular season feel kind of meaningless if they bring back the same coach and the same guys, and then we just wait till the playoffs and do it all over again.
Well, it had a bit of that feel this year where obviously Matthews had his big year last year, and so this year is like, well, he's already done that, and you're kind of hoping maybe Marner hits the 100-point mark, which he ultimately didn't. 99. But most of the regular season they were just kind of rolling along, doing their thing, which is great. But it felt like we were just kind of waiting for mid-April to roll around and see what happens. And for 2 weeks it looked like things were really different, and then here we are. But at the same time, all of this said, you also don't want to make a change for the sake of making a change. It's got to make sense.
Agreed.
I like the way you worded it earlier, where Shanahan allegedly went to the 4 guys and said, our intention is to keep you here for that period of time. Great word, intention, because, I'd seen the rumors thrown around that people talking that Shanahan made this promise or seemingly made this promise that you're going to stay, we're not going to trade you. And, brings back memories of Masai Ujiri allegedly promising DeMar DeRozan that we're not going to trade you, and then all of a sudden the big fish becomes available, Kawhi Leonard, and one guy's out the door and the other guy's in, which proves the point of nothing's for certain. You don't know what's out there, and so you just can't in good faith make that promise. So if the intention is to keep them here, then my intention is always to keep good players. That doesn't mean anything. My intention would be for Marner and Matthews and Nylander to win 3 Stanley Cups and retire Leafs and have statues outside the building. But if somebody comes to you with a deal in their back pocket saying, here's a chance for you to, both have a good player and to fundamentally change the composition of your core, then it's hard.
You have to entertain it for sure.
You have to. Like when this team is, we're not talking about a team like that. Just they've fallen short a little bit, or they're, they lose in the conference final, or they go to the cup and they just don't have that final series. We're talking about a team that has won nothing. They haven't won
one round.
They won. This year they got 2 extra wins than they've gotten previous year.
Yeah, and you know what? That first round against Tampa this year, I know they won.
Yeah.
They shouldn't have won.
Yeah, well,
they weren't the better team in the series.
Brad Treliving said that himself. He said they were better last year.
I totally agree.
Yeah, so do I. So, but as I mentioned before, it seems to be the case that you win with your core, and they didn't change the core this year, and the result was largely the same, notwithstanding all the peripheral moves that they made, which I was a big fan of. I thought they were great. I would love to see more of that, but yeah.